Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a police! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Hello and welcome back to a special edition of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. My good friend Sixties is not here with me right now as I record the introduction, but he was with me on the weekend where we were live from Jack's Bar and Grill for the Blue and Gold Alliance reunion. We were fortunate enough to be involved in the BGA reunion luncheon last year, and it was a wonderful experience back then, just as it was a wonderful experience this weekend past. Myself and Sixties had a great time catching up with former players, former officials, having a chat about football, what they're up to, and just seeing the positive vibes of former players and officials coming together to celebrate their time at the club. And while I kept myself busy with photography duties for the event itself, Sixties was on the microphone catching up with former players, having a chat to them about their playing careers, their experiences with the Blue and Gold Alliance, as well as what they've been up to. But before we do get to that actual content, a quick shout out to a few different parties today. Obviously, they are the sponsors of the tip sheet itself, Big Swing Golf North Mead, and star partners Real Estate Auburn, Rowan and Parramatta, both of whom help us bring you the show for each and every episode. But also, a thank you to both Parramatta Leagues Club for hosting the Blue and Gold Alliance reunion luncheon on Saturday, as well as the Sunday morning catch-up ahead of the game. And also a thank you to the Parramatta Eels themselves, as they strengthen their connection to the Blue and Gold Alliance and all the former players and officials and the aid they provide to Bill Richards and the BGA. From this point, it's going to be all 60, so hopefully you enjoy his dulcet tones and the conversations that he had as he caught up with former players and officials, from Joel Reddy right through to Denis Fitzgerald.
We're here with player number 683, Joel Reddy. Joel, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. It's great to be here.
Joel, a day like today, how important is it?
I think it's very important. You know, it's great to see all the ex-players back here. I'd love to get a few more from my generation. That's the call to arms for next year and the year after. So it's really good to see the 88 crew here today that won the reserve grade premiership. They're all, you know, it's just good. You know, once you retire from football, you sort of go in your own direction. And I think it's great when you can actually bring it all back together sometimes. And because you've all sort of been through the same similar situations together, and you can talk about your past memories and all of that. So I enjoy, you know, seeing this group join back together again year after year.
Now, you played at Parramatta during an era where we had a couple of really important coaches. First of all, Brian Smith, what qualities made him a great rugby league coach?
Yeah, I think the thing with Brian was he was just such a good teacher of the game. So I was lucky enough to make my debut under Brian Smith in 2005, and it really set me up sort of for the future of my career in just about professionalism, but also just being able to teach the game of rugby league. He was a really good teacher of the game, and I learned a lot from the pre-seasons I had under Brian. I only played a couple of games, but it was those pre-season trainings and the way that he used to coach the coaches all the way through the grades, that we're all sort of on the same page with the fundamentals of the game, and that's where he was really good.
Yeah, you mentioned to me before that he didn't make assumptions that you had all the fundamentals. Even though you were in NRL, those fundamentals had to be taught to everyone that was in there.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where just because you're an NRL first grader, you don't know everything about the game, and it's not only that you don't know, but there's certain skills that you just have to keep practicing to get better and better at. And I still remember even early days with someone like Fui Momo, we did a lot of catch pass and all that sort of stuff, and he wouldn't use it too often because most of the time he was just running over blokes and skittling them on the ground. But every now and then, like there's him making breaks and being able to draw them past the fullback, and that's because everyone had to know the fundamental skills. Everyone had to know how to catch and how to pass and where to be, and all those little things. When you put it in a game scenario and you're under pressure, you've got to have done the hours and hours of that sort of practice to be able to do it in a game, not just run through your sets and tactics. It's more about those little skills that you need to be able to work on all the way through your career, not just because, I'm in first grade now, I don't need to worry about the simple stuff. It just doesn't work like that.
Now, you just mentioned Fui. I've got to ask you, how much of a character was he to have around the team?
Oh, mate, he was awesome. Like, he very clever guy, and just a really great character. He's still playing now, I think.
Yeah.
So, and what he used to do on the field, and what he used to do his body and how hard he used to run, it was just a great person and a great player to get to play with. Definitely have him in my front row of my top 13 side, and really enjoyed the energy he always brought, and just how good he was.
Did he really steal people's thongs? Did he really steal people's thongs? I remember there was
yeah. No, there was definitely plenty of that. He must. That's probably. Yeah, I reckon he'd have a few pairs at home.
And you got to tell me, he used to make out as if his English skills weren't the best. Was he putting that on?
Yeah, no, they were definitely good when they needed to be good,
Yeah.
and then not so good when it suited him.
Now, I mentioned another coach, Daniel Anderson, that huge run in 2009. And of course, it's pertinent to mention Daniel as well, because there's fundraising going on for Daniel, important fundraising. But how good was 2009 to be a part of?
Yeah, it was. Unfortunately, we didn't get the job done right at the end there, but it was an incredible year, and it was a testament to the way that Daniel coached us as well that year. Just off the back of early in my career having Brian Smith, someone who was so technically good with the skills and how to play, then Daniel Anderson was able to take that to another level with just understanding each individual player and what they like to do, and then being able to bring that together with the team. So, we sort of got stuck in a bit of a rut early in that season, and he had an idea for us on the way that we were going to play, and he admitted sort of midway through the year that what he thought he was going to be able to do with that team wasn't going to quite work. So we changed a few things and started to play the way that he thought that would suit us best after seeing us for that first half of the season, and that is a credit to a good coach understanding that the players that he has right now. I think at times coaches seem to want to play for next season, or they've got a few players playing. Let's start to play the way that will suit them for next year, but it just doesn't work. I think it's unfortunate when you're in a side and they're looking to the future instead of looking to this weekend and looking to see what they can do right now and what best can we get out of our players right now this very season. And I think that's the way that you should be taking every season and every game. And then you can still look out for the future, but the way that Daniel was able to get that group together and figure out a way that was going to help us win games and get the most out of the season, and he almost got us there. We're really close to actually taking it out, and a couple of decisions here and there, and then obviously there's a bit more to it with the Storm, but it was an incredible year, which unfortunately didn't end the way that we wanted it to.
Now, I'm not going to ask you a particular question about the Storm. What I'm going to ask is this: when people have raised the topic about the premiership's been stripped off them, it should be given to the Eels, is that the way you'd want to be known as a premiership winner?
No, you obviously want to win the grand final. Like the feeling of winning a grand final is what you want, not so much the medal or the ring. But how do you take that feeling away from Melbourne Storm? Well, you can't. They'll always have that feeling of winning the premiership. The only way you could possibly take it away from them is to probably give it to someone else.
Yeah.
So the NRL never went down that path. Would I felt like I won it? No, I wouldn't have won it if I didn't actually win that game. And that's the NRL's call. That's what they did. They beat us on the day. That's all. There's not much else really to it. You want that feeling of winning, and we didn't have it.
Yeah, I won't put you on the spot with this unless you want to say something, but like when there's been a lot of talk about them celebrating it recently and that it was insensitive and what have you. My take on it is I'm not crazy about them celebrating it now because they actually got to celebrate it back then when other clubs have had points and all that taken off them during a season, and they did have that as well, but they got the moment, and that's so their memories are the moments of winning, the rings that they got, those sorts of things. So I'm not a fan of them celebrating it now because they celebrated it back then, whereas all the teams they played against couldn't celebrate it where they were able to. So that's my take on that. So
yeah, it's a fair point, and I don't want to get too much into it because at the end of the day, we were beaten on that day, and nothing will bring that feeling to us.
Yeah,
because they already had it on that day.
Yeah. So, what did it mean for you to be a Parramatta Eel?
Oh, it was my debut club, so it holds a very special place in my heart to always wanting to play first grade rugby league, and then given that opportunity to do it and to do it at Parramatta, it was a dream come true for me, and it's I've made lifelong friends from the club, players and staff, and I enjoy watching from afar. I don't have a lot to do with the club anymore, but they definitely hold a special place in my heart.
Now, you were talking to me before about how important the BGA is in having these sorts of events. You've also told me your ambition with getting particular players involved, because on top of that, there's an event 2 years' time, and there's also next year with what Bill Richards is trying to do with Back to Parramatta. So what's one of your goals to help that out?
Yeah, I just think it's trying to get the probably my generation, a few more guys from my generation in here. I know, everyone sort of goes in their different directions once they retire, but I think it's important to sort of try and reconnect a little bit. And, most guys are just happy to sort of, go along their own way. But, it's not that easy sometimes going from playing professional rugby league to then going out in the workforce. And,
yep.
All these guys here have been through the same thing. Most of the era that was here had to work throughout their professional or work throughout their rugby league career. So the transition probably wasn't so hard. They probably just stopped playing footy and continued to do what they were doing. Whereas my generation put everything into rugby league, may have educated themselves throughout the way, which I did, but may not have. So that transition, I think, is a lot harder for those guys. So I think it's sort of more important, I think, to try and reconnect with those players that spent so much time together and then had to find their way outside of footy in all these different directions without having much, insight, or without having much, idea of what they were going to do after.
Yep.
So it's days like this where, you can bring back together and sort of reconnect and see where you are and see how you can help each other out as well. Because we're all sort of connected, so it's about bringing us all back together and helping each other out.
And we've got a 20-year event next 2 years from now.
Yeah, so the 2005 reserve grade premiership in 2005. So my goal is to try and get as many of those guys back as possible. So we won it in 05, 06 and 07, and then Wentworthville won in 08. So it's 4 premierships in a row for that reserve grade era, and it'd be nice to get as many as we can back, try to drop the average age around here a little bit, and get as many of those guys back here together for a reunion and, reconnect.
And if Joey Grimer's listening to this, you're a part of those teams on the staff, so we want you in there as well. Back here, I know you're up there in PNG, Joey. We want you back here for those events in 2 years' time. Actually, you'll be celebrating getting the Papua New Guinea as the 18th franchise in by then. So we'll see you back here then, Joey. Joel, thank you so much for today. I really appreciate your time, especially with the technical hiccup that we had before. Thanks, mate.
All good. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Right now, this is my absolute pleasure because I've got one of my favourite players from yesteryear. He was a crowd favourite on the wing in the lower grades for the Parramatta Eels. His name is Giulio Pomponio. Giulio, thank you for joining us to have a bit of a chat about today.
My pleasure.
Mate, first of all, how good is it to be able to catch up with people at a reunion like this?
A day like this is fantastic. I've been here now, I think 3 or 4 times, catching up with some of my old mates back in the 70s, 75, 76, 77. And I know last year I saw some of the guys that I hadn't seen for 40 odd years. And it's fantastic, catch up on memories, talking about old times. And those days we were a close-knit family, we were mates, we played for each other, and it was just fantastic to catch up.
And what a lot of people wouldn't realise these days is that back then, when you were playing under 23s, there was a big crowd that would be already through the gates at Cumberland Oval or wherever it was being played. It's not like today in the stadiums where there's reserved seats and people wandering just before first grade. You had to get your spot on the hill. So all the boys, they were playing in front of, really vocal and large home crowds.
Absolutely. I can still remember walking in before the game, signing autographs. Couldn't believe it. We were just basically nobodies. Starting the game, the crowd was packed. It was 20 to 25,000 people at the start of under 23s. And I must admit, I played up to the crowd a little bit. I enjoyed the crowd support, and I enjoyed every minute of playing.
Well, I did mention before that you were a crowd favourite. When you'd score a try and the ground announcer used to take great delight in really stretching out your name. It was almost like that fella from the boxing. I can't remember the fella that does the crowd announcing, but you'd get that treatment on your name. So, and you said you played up a little bit to the crowd when that would happen as well.
I did, yes. It was, and I still remember those days, and it's, as I say, 77 to 2023, that's 46 years. It's great memories, and I'll never forget those memories, ever.
So what was the best thing about being a Parramatta Eel back then?
Well, firstly, I grew up with a whole bunch of guys playing President's Cup initially in 75. There were guys from Cabramatta, there were guys from Fairfield City, guys from Toongabbie, Seven Hills, and we were best mates. We'd go out on a Friday night. We wouldn't drink too much, by the way.
No, of course not.
No, we won't tell you about that. But and we'd train on Saturday morning before games on Sunday, and it was like you'd play for each other. It's none of this. There was no money those days. There was very little money. You played for the enjoyment of playing for Parramatta, and to me that was everything. We would have played for nothing.
Yeah, and well, it was very close to playing for nothing anyway. back in those days. Mate, the work of the Blue and Gold Alliance to put these sorts of events together, what do you have to say about that?
Well, one of my best mates, I played a lot of touch football with him over the years, was Ted Solkovich. Ted was unfortunately passed away over a year ago. He got me involved, he said, and Jeff Gerard as well. We were all members of Cabramatta Golf Club, and they said, we want all ex-players to turn up to the Blue and Gold reunion. And I was very appreciative because it's something that I really enjoyed. And we do meet a lot of guys here, some guys we don't know, but it's important to meet some of the guys. Like today I met Graham Atkins again, Timmy Logue, and Mick Kelly, who else are there? There's quite a few guys that you love to catch up every year.
Yes,
so it's lovely to talk to people. Even Stephen Edge, my ex-coach, Lenny Stacker. We love to talk about what we did and what happened in the old days. So.
And now the Blue and Gold still runs. It just courses through your veins.
Yes.
Tell me about now being a supporter.
Well, as an ex-Parramatta player, Parramatta are everything to me. I will not miss a minute of every game. I will not miss all the talk about the game before the game, who gets selected, I just like to know what's going on, and I bleed blue and gold, and I would love them to go well again this year. It's going to be tough, but let's hope for the best. So.
Well, it starts tomorrow, doesn't it? We've got to get that win against the Dragons.
Turn up for the game, and let's hope that we can put a big score on St George. And the next 3 weeks after that will be tough, but if they play to their best, and I hope they can, and I hope they can play some football rather than this one-out stuff sometimes that they play. If they play proper football, they will win. And they can win the comp if they do that.
Well, mate, today has been a real pleasure for me. I always enjoy these events, but I'm so glad I was able to catch up with you. I'm going to be able to go home and say to the family that we had a bit of a chat and be able to talk about the old days as well as what's happening with you now.
Yeah.
By the way, what are you doing these days?
Well, I've ever since I retired, I finished my degree as an accountant. I had my own accounting practice. I opened up in 1985 and been practicing now for 38 years.
Yes.
So I'm still working and very, very busy. Still actively involved in my touch football. So playing for Balmain at the time. We go to the state championships this year.
Yes.
So I'm still keeping relatively fit, I hope. And would love, so that's. So.
Mate, really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Craig. All the best. Thank you.
Well, we're now with player number 493. It's Chris King. A lot of people who are big fans of the Eels in the 90s would remember Chris King run around in the back row for the Eels. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Now, just quickly on today, how good is it to have reunion days and be able to catch up with teammates and maybe some mates you haven't seen for a while?
Mate, it's been an exceptional day. There's guys here that I haven't seen for, it would be at least 30-odd years. So to be able to remember stories and tell stories, it's been a great time.
Have they changed much from the facts?
Yeah, mate, there's plenty of stories, not factual, but no, it's all in good fun, and it's been a really good time.
So just to familiarise people as well, you would have been at the club the same time as, was Paul Dunn running around when you were there? Who else? Paul Clark, Nobby Clark, was he running around the same time as you?
Yes, mate, I played both with those guys. So I think it was 91 I ended first grade and finished in the end of 97.
So you sort of straddled some tough years and then years where the club was just starting to launch into a period of success. How would you define those years at the club? I mean, was it still a great organisation to be a part of?
Mate, it certainly was. And yes, you're right, there wasn't a great amount of success in that time, but I was extremely proud and honoured to, to be able to run out on the old Parramatta Stadium, wear the blue and gold colours. As I said, that the wins weren't many, but the ones that we did have, mate, it was they were very special.
Celebrated hard every win?
Yeah, mate, they were rare, so they were celebrated well.
Well, it's good to see that there's a lot of fellas here who are celebrating being back together again. How important is the work that the Blue and Gold Alliance does in keeping former players connected?
Mate, personally, there's, as I said, there's guys here I haven't seen for 30-odd years. And I'm so grateful that I was able to meet these guys again, and literally there's one guy who lives possibly, 55 kilometres from me, which I didn't know about. So, there'll be, he and I will be getting together again on the far north coast of New South Wales. So it's things like that, but and there's some guys that I do stay friendly with. I've just, days like this are special, mate. It's something that needs
So what
to
are you
happen.
doing with yourself these days?
Mate, I do have been in the pub game for many years, over 17 years. So I'm currently working in a bottle shop and working for a security company in the north coast of New South Wales.
And just as a final question, what would be your fondest memory of your time at the Eels?
Mate, I come from casino, so we got one game a week to watch on TV up there back in those days. So to arrive at Parramatta, I remember arriving early and waiting for the under-21s to train and sitting under a tree watching the great team of the 80s train before us, and I just knew I was very lucky, and I was very fortunate to become a part of that culture.
Well, mate, we really appreciate you spending some time with us. Let's hope as well that next year Billy Richards' dream of having that back to Parramatta Day where we can get as many Eels players as possible back on the one day comes to fruition.
Mate, that sounds great, and I hope it works.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks. Thank you.
Cheers, mate. Appreciate that. Today at the Blue and Gold Alliance Player Reunion, there is a special tribute to the 1988 President's Cup premiership winning team for Parramatta. I'm lucky enough to have the captain of the team on that day with me right now. He's player 495 for the Eels. His name is Rod Collins. Rod, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's a very special occasion for us under-21s from back in 1988 to be here today, and we really thank the Blue and Gold Alliance and Parramatta Leagues Club for having us today. It's been a great day so far.
Now, Rod, the question was asked before when you were addressing the reunion about how special it was to win a title wearing the blue and gold. So can you share that with our listeners?
Yeah, well, back in 1988, it was the first year that they changed the third grade from under-23s to under-21s, and a lot of us, it was our first year to be graded at Parramatta. And, many of us were 17, 18 years of age, and it was a privilege to be there in a part of the group of Parramatta where we were training on a weekly basis with the Sterling and the Kennys and the Growths and, the legends of the game. And, we were privileged to be there in that year, and it was a very special time in my life and a lot of the guys in our team.
And it was a history-making win because it was the very first title that was won on the Sydney Football Stadium.
Yeah, we thought playing out of Parramatta Stadium was, special. We had a brand new stadium. It was only a couple of years old, and there was, it was a privilege to run out on that. But when we got the ability, the opportunity to run out on the Sydney Football Stadium in the first grand final in 1988, it was another level for us all.
And can you share with us some of the fellas who were in the team that day that are here at the reunion?
Yeah, we've got the Billy Greentrees, we've got the Gavin Catnacks, we've got the we had a number of other players that didn't get a chance to be there, but we had the
you had some, but yeah, I think your captain from the season he was promoted to reserve grade, wasn't he? So he wasn't actually able to captain on the day, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. David Daines was the captain through most of the year, and I got the privilege to take over from him as he got sent up the grades into reserve grade. But we had the George Bartletts, we had the Darren Smiths, we had the a great bunch of blokes who are a part of that team, which was, there's plenty that I've forgotten, but, they were all great.
Well, there's been a bit of footage that's been up on the screen during the day, which we've been able to look at whilst people have been enjoying catching up. I noticed Andrew Fitzhenry out there at fullback.
How could I miss Fitzy? He kicked like a champion on that day in the grand final, and he certainly brought an energy and a senior membership of the team, and leading from the back, he was a great talker, and probably got us through the grand final in a number of ways. Yeah.
You're a bit of a backline utility back in the day. What position did you play on grand final day?
I was in the centres. Yeah, I played number 3 next to David Woods, who isn't here today. And as you know, David Woods had an exceptional career, and it was an extremely good talent, and one of my good friends too. Yeah.
Now, you ended up making your first grade debut, I think, in about 91. Played some more first grade games across 91, 92, 93 from memory. What positions were you playing? I see you're a bit of a utility. You played a number of positions, didn't you, when you came into first grade?
I was predominantly in the centres. I think I played a bit of fullback there for a while, but I played on the wing one time. But I always thought that my main position would have been lock forward back in the day, which I didn't play a lot of.
Right. So now you've had the chance to catch up with a number of people today. What's the best thing about these sorts of reunions?
Well, for those of you who go to school reunions, it's like going back in time. We all went back in time today, and every year we get together, there's always some story or some memory that pops back up, and we get to talk about it, and more again, we get to connect again. And the connections in life with good friends, and especially, being a part of a sports team, where we train throughout the week and competed on the weekend, which went for a year or two or whatever it was, we get to rekindle those memories and those friendships of, which are very special and more importantly, everlasting. Yeah.
And the Blue and Gold Alliance, what could you say about them and the work they do?
Oh, look, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have a day like today. We wouldn't have the support that many players need over their later years, and it's an integral part of the Parramatta Eels Rugby League Club, offering post career support, and there's no doubt that their support and ability to access is going to be even more prevalent in the future.
Now, final question for you, Rod. What was the best thing about being a Parramatta Eel?
Oh, look, I think it's always a matter of putting on that jersey, and my biggest, best thing was running out onto the stadium at Parramatta Stadium. Didn't matter whether there was 10 people in the crowd or a full house. Just running out onto that oval was, in the blue and gold was, an amazing experience for me and for many of the players who have gone in the past. So that's what I enjoyed most. Yeah.
Rod, thank you so much for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of this afternoon.
Thanks, Craig. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Well, it's my pleasure now to welcome player number 536. I got that right, didn't I, Troy?
That's
yeah,
right,
Troy
yeah.
Campbell. Troy, thank you for jumping on the Cumberland throw and have a bit of a chat with us about the today's reunion.
Yeah, not a problem at all. What a good afternoon it's been so far.
How good is it to catch up with your mates like this?
Look, it's football is football, and a few of the guys have said from the 21s team that you haven't seen someone for 30 years, and it's like it's yesterday, and that's what happens. You've formed that mateship over the time that you played, and then you catch up, and it was like it was yesterday that you saw them, and there's a guy there, Ryan Schofield. He played. He was here 91 to 94, I think he said. He had 4 years, and this is his first reunion. And, mate, I said, you'll wake up tomorrow and go, it's one of the best days you've had, because this is what it's about. Catching up with everyone. You may not see them every day, but when you do see them, it's quality. So,
what was the best thing about being an Eel?
Oh, the club back in the day, look, we had good facilities, a great ground, good management through. And
terrific supporters.
Very, very... Look, I'm on a couple of these social media pages with the Eels, and they're very hardcore, and they take their supporting serious. And I look at some of it and think, who's the coach of this team? Brad Arthur, or they do take it quite serious. But no, in jest, they are that. It's a very a big supportive side, the Eels, yeah.
And you were here during the Brian Smith era. I've had a chat with some of the players in the past about Brian Smith, so I want you to tell me what were his best qualities as a coach.
His attention to detail. Look, he came on board. We'd had some ex-players as coaches, and then we'd sort of... during my time, I'd never had someone so thorough and technical, and he went back to grassroots of the game, back to basics and skills. He analysed the game like no one else I'd seen. We'd play a game on the Sunday. He'd be back in his unit or in the footy office, and he'd have a video of what went wrong, what went right. Here's your VHS, go home and watch that. Mate, he analysed the game very well. A really good coach, and something that I didn't have in my earlier years playing grade. And yeah, look, he a great coach, but I don't know why he just couldn't get the trophy that the Wayne Bennett and the Bellamy and all the great coaches couldn't get. So unfortunately for Brian, he didn't get that. But
do you think winning a title is what defines you as being a great coach, or do you think in the case of a Brian Smith, who brought so much improvement to a lot of clubs, that there's other qualities that define being a great coach?
Yeah, look, it's who'd be a coach? Who'd be a coach these days? Seriously. There's so much pressure, but look, it's more than look what Brian Smith done in his tenure at the club. Like, I think it was magnificent. He's very thorough with his juniors and making sure they're coming through. And there's a lot of work, and to be a successful coach, it's just not about that first grade side. So there's a lot of work in the background that you got to do. Obviously, you see clubs with salary cap issues. You've got to manage that. You've got to have all the back end in order. And I think Brian took Parramatta to that next level without winning the title, but he got them to a stage where they had the junior development coming through. I think Parramatta should be grateful for what he put into the club and got them to where they were without having that title. So, yeah.
It's interesting to mention that, because I'm a big fan of Brad Arthur because of what he puts into the juniors and the pathways. So we see him go down and help coach the Harold Matts, the SG Ball, the Jersey Flag. It's a big part of what he enjoys doing, and really someone like Brian Smith was probably a pioneer in getting so involved in pathways.
Definitely, and I played under 21s with Brad. I was his captain, and what he's done, he's gone through systems at Manly and Melbourne, and and obviously he's watched what Brian Smith done to the club and knew how important it was and still is to be that type of coach. And at Parramatta, there's a lot of pressure, and unless you're doing all that, I don't think your term at Parramatta is going to be very long. And looking at Brad with his he's going to outdo Brian Smith with his years at the club. I think now or this year.
He has already. Yeah.
I think he has already. So hats off to him, and that's what he's got to do. It's not just about your A grade side. It's what's coming through and what you've done in the background to get to what your A grade is at the time. So
now you can give us a bit of a unique insight. So I'm going to put you on the spot. If there was a quality about the Brad Arthur that you knew a little bit of back in those days that was going to make a good rugby league coach, what would that have been?
Brad's a bit like myself. He's very old school, was very trained hard, played hard, was one of the boys, and I think that's where he's got his group at the moment. And it's a tough gig. Look, I'd hate to coach in this era because there's so many personalities. I work and I try and find people to help me work, labourers, this and that, and it's hard to get good help. And I think he's got some good help. It's how you deal with them on a day-to-day, weekly basis, yearly basis. You know, and with Brad's old school ethics, I think he's got the group to where they need to be. It's just, it was hard because of salary cap issues at the end of last year that players went. Marnie, Isaiah Papali.
Yep.
You know, look, we lost a few, and that put a big dent in where Brad had got the side and achieved what he had to get to the grand final. I think if we had kept the same playing group, we would be in a different position right now on the ladder. So, unfortunately, that's where we're at.
Now, just before we wrap things up, a day like today, first of all, how important is the Blue and Gold Alliance in keeping former players connected?
Look, as I said before, and you mentioned to me about Bill, I've been, from our inaugural year in 2016 when Mickey Vella, we formed the Blue and Gold Alliance. I was part of the committee, still am a little bit involved with our Queensland side of players at the moment. I try and tune into the committee meetings when I can in Sydney. Billy has done a fantastic job taking over Mickey Vella. Obviously, Bill's been out of the game a lot longer than what Mickey Vella had been. Mick done a fabulous job, but just due to work commitments and kids and stuff like that, he couldn't continue. It's so important to keep the group together. It's important for the club. Like, you know, you watch the games on TV. Manly's got their Old Boys Day. Newcastle, their Old Boys Day is so important. Melbourne, everyone's Old Boys Day is very important to what the club's come from, where the club's at, and where the club's going to go. And to see all these guys celebrating the 88 under-21s grand final here today, it's great. You know, look, there's goals and there's achievements that everyone needs to celebrate, and I think it's good, and we need to do it yearly.
Well, we've got that big goal of Billy Richards for next year with a Back to Parramatta Day. It's big. It's a big ambition to get there, but how good would it be to get as many as you possibly can back here?
It'd be awesome to get everyone. Like, I think the player numbers now, I think we're over the thousands, as in graded first grade players. So I'm 5'3", and that was 20 years, 1992, 30 years ago. So we're into the 1,200 and something players. So, like, if we can't get 500 or 600 here next year, there's something wrong. You know, back to Paradise. I don't want them to burn Bankwest Stadium down. You know, like we can't have that as in the Cumberland Oval days. But let's have a back to Parramatta Day, and, you know, let's get 600 or 700 here for the day. So,
Troy, I think it's a great ambition to have, and thank you for joining us.
No worries, then, Craig. Thanks, mate. Cheers.
Well, we're now with player number 259, Bill Richards. He also happens to be the president of the Blue and Gold Alliance. So, Bill, welcome back to the Cumberland Throw, because we have chatted before, but so welcome back.
Yes, we have. Thank you, Craig. That's really good.
Now, Bill, how important is it to have these reunions and have catch-ups every so often during the year that the BGA does organise?
It's extremely important because these players, a lot of them live in different areas. They separated from each other. A lot of them don't get a chance to get together very often, unless they're in a playing group that's won a competition or something like that. Generally, they just go out and do their own thing. And this is really important from our perspective, to make sure we at least get them back once a year to let them know that, hey, we're here, and come to sit with your mates, discuss a few stories, tell a few lies, and have a general bit of fun while you're doing it. Really, really important stuff, because, you know, I've got a passion about making sure that we're looking after our former players, and unless we get them together, we don't know what's going on.
You know, when we were talking to Troy Campbell before, he mentioned someone that he was talking to, that this was their first reunion. I mean, it must give you pride when you see people here at a reunion for the first time.
Without a doubt, Craig. Actually, I was just talking to someone then, and he said, I haven't seen some of these people for 30 years. And I mean, that's fantastic when you see that sort of thing. To have those people come up to you and say, wow, really enjoyed this, we'll be coming next year. And I said, that's what we want to see. We want to see more of that, because the more we can get, the more we can look after, the more we can care about, and the more we can get to know. I mean, but the big thing is we need to know where they are. That's the point.
Now, people probably wouldn't appreciate the work that goes into the Blue and Gold Alliance, but you have a committee, you meet regularly with that committee, you have people like yourself that give up your time, not just at those meetings, but in your own time to make sure that a group like this functions. How many events are you up to a year at the moment for the Blue and Gold Alliance?
Predominantly, we've only got 3. We'll say 4 basically. We have a golf day, the Teddy Solkowitz Memorial Golf Day. There's a game day, which occasionally that's at the beginning of the competition. We have the reunion, incorporating the former Players' Day, and then we have the Christmas drinks. But we're looking to expand that probably next year to maybe include a walkathon or something like that.
And you have some of the smaller gatherings too, like for example there was the Eels Training Day recently where you were down there for the captain's run.
Yes, yeah, we try to see if we can organise a captain's run, maybe 1 or 2 captain's runs, because I think it's great for the former players to be able to mix with the current players and have a chat and get to know them. And I think vice versa, because they rather like to see, they want to see more of the former players get up there and have a chat with them.
Now tell us about the big goal, which is the Back to Parramatta Day next year.
That's the challenge. That's going to be a challenge and a half. But basically, what we want to do is try and contact all of those players who have played and were initially started playing with Parramatta, or whether it be junior grades right through the 3 grades, and get them back to Parramatta for that one day. I reckon it will be a hoot to get it done. It's going to be a challenge, because the big issue was with how do we contact them? Have we got all the contact numbers for these people? But it's really quite interesting when you're talking to people around here. They're saying, oh yeah, I know someone who knows, for instance, has the reserve grade premiership side, and they've got them on their phone and they know everyone. Well, we need to know that. We need to know how we can contact these people, because we want to get them for next year. And we need to work out a suitable time when we can arrange this, when we've got young and old. You know?
It's a terrific ambition, and if there's anyone listening to this who has family or friends who have been a former Parramatta player, because the Blue and Gold Alliance is for all graded
yes.
former players and officials. So it's not just first grade players, it's not just the people who have been the big stars over the years, it's for anyone who's been a former graded Parramatta player or official. Yeah. Bill, what's something as well that I was at a meeting with the Blue and Gold Alliance the other night, and you were talking about all the different aspects of the Blue and Gold Alliance in the way of looking after former players and fundraising and that sort of thing. What's the thing that you're proudest of with the Blue and Gold Alliance at the moment?
Well, I think the first one was establishing the Blue and Gold Alliance as a non-profit organisation, getting that set up as a non-profit organisation. It took some time, but we finally got there. The second part was also establishing our own account where we can actually now apply for grants, not only from the Leagues Club, but from other areas to help us support our members. And I think that's, to me, is the 2 key areas that I'm most proud of. And we've got a lot of structure in this, and we've got some great people who are willing to put their time in for the BGA.
And we want to give a shout out to the Parramatta Leagues Club as well,
yes.
who are great supporters of the Blue and Gold Alliance. And of course, we're staging this in Jack's Bar and Grill in Parramatta Leagues Club today. So a massive thank you and a shout out to Parramatta Leagues Club, who do have Parramatta Leagues Club. They've set it up to be the home of the Eels, and we're very pleased that that's the case with the club. Bill, thank you again for inviting us to be part of today. Thank you for all the fine work that you do with the Blue and Gold Alliance. And let's get that message out to as many people as we can who've been involved with Parramatta graded teams. Look forward to next year and the Back to Parramatta Day.
Terrific, Craig. Thanks very much, and thank you guys, because you're great supporters of us as well, and we really appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, it's my honour to be with a man whose name says it all, Denis Fitzgerald, the legend of Parramatta. Denis, thank you for coming on the tip sheet for our chat about what's happening here today with the Blue and Gold Alliance Reunion Day.
Pleasure to be here. Any time's a good time to talk about Parramatta, and especially the history and the champions of the past, and not only the champions, the guys that really put in on and off the field.
Well, how good is it for you to be able to catch up with former teammates, people that you've actually come across in your role from an administration point of view within the club, people that you signed to contracts? I mean, it must be... I mean, you've got a different connection to a lot of the people here in that you have different relationships with them. So what's it like for you to catch up?
Oh, it's very enjoyable to see what everyone's doing, and hopefully that they're generally in good health. But one thing that's a real worry is the situation with dementia and the things that had happened where we didn't have the bunker back in the 60s and 70s. So I played in the 70s, and there's so many players both at Parramatta and others that have got dementia. And it's something that the whole game of rugby league should look at very carefully and do a bit more and just do research or put money into research, of course. So there has been some that it's been very good, but it's a bit of a worry when you talk about CTE and you can't diagnose it fully until people have died.
It was interesting that you mentioned that, because I was just over there with Billy Richards and Steve Finale, and they were talking about this, and even, and this is something I'm bringing up out of the blue, but whether there could even be a connection between the number of broken noses, having things like sleep apnea, and then that also being a precipitator for some of the issues that are happening with regard to dementia and brain issues for older players.
Yeah, very much so. And that's the thing that research can do as it progresses. And just as a bit of a side issue there, I mean, I only played about half the year in 1973, and I couldn't put on any weight or strength, and I was tired, and that was took 6 months before they diagnosed celiac disease, where they didn't know a lot about and had to go on a gluten-free diet. So I was pleased about that, but they didn't know much about it then, because 17 years later, I was having the odd sandwich, a wheat, barley or rye in gluten, and then I discovered that my same specialist said, you're okay, you haven't got celiac disease any longer, but it was because of the ongoing research with something like that, which is a long way from problems, dementia and brain disease, but it just means more and more research that you do, and you look at or do testing of players of rugby league at anywhere, especially maybe it's even more of a worry in country areas where you haven't got so much control or restrictions or bunkers, and once again in days of the 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s in the country areas, it was still a bit of a, there was talk that you're a bit weak if you left the field, even though you're knocked out. So you can't have that, and thankfully that's gradually changing, but it needs to change as quickly as possible.
And of course, back in the day, there wasn't really that focus on diet or having a club dietitian or, and even, I mean, nowadays we're at the stage where you've got players that have got dietary issues. They can play and they can be at their, at as optimum weight as they can be because they're looked after. We have players who are diabetics who are playing the game. We've always had players who are asthmatics and, had their puffers and what have you. But the game's come a long way to start to recognise a lot of issues that weren't issues, ones that they faced back in the day. And as you say, like, you had to face that with a diagnosed celiac disease and back at the time, but if it was nowadays, your career might be even longer than what it was. Would that be a fair?
Yeah, well, it would have been. You could have been playing for a long time, but it's a matter of also just in my case, which is probably similar to players my vintage who played in the the, once again, 60s or 70s, and I'm 73. And it's probably about average that I've had 2 hip replacements and 1 knee replacement. So I've got 1 good knee left. And that there's a number of reasons for that. A lot of it was because of all the hard grounds that you played on, as well as that the behaviour of players that you didn't necessarily get sent off because you hit someone in the head. You know, sometimes you're patted on the back. But particularly, and then, as you said, as far as the medical attention, in my day you had a club doctor who was usually at most of the games. You generally didn't have a physio there. If you wanted to get some physio treatment, you'd have to go down to Marsden Street, Parramatta, and see the physiotherapist there. Make an appointment first to see if we can get in. Where now it seems like most clubs have 2 full-time physios and very, very good medical professionals, as well as medical rooms and all the equipment that you need for general fitness work, as well as for rehabilitation work as well.
I think there's a space in rugby league, especially with centres of excellence that are being developed and what have you, because the American experience is, for a number of their franchises over there, they make business units out of the departments that they have to have for the athletes, you know. So if they've got doctors, if they've got physios, there's a capacity for the public to see such people who are employed by the club to look after the players, but then they also use that big department to look after, you know, to generate an income for the club. So I think that's probably an interesting space. But I wanted to get on to, you've overseen premiership winning teams, grand final teams as head of the club. You've also been, you've had your own success. You know, you played in a grand final yourself. You played for Australia. Tell me about the buzz that you get, the difference in the buzz that you get as a player, as opposed to the person who's put a team together. What's the difference in how you feel looking at a season from either perspective?
Well, I think with playing and going on the field, it's the immediacy of it. When you're playing with your mates, mostly mates in the teams, and just being competitive. I mean, everyone's competitive playing rugby league as well as in most other things. But when you put so much physical and mental time into it, and you get a result, either a weekly result or a monthly result or a season result or a career result, you know, that's all different stages. And probably in my administration career, since I had played with Parramatta from 69 to 77, then I became what was called club secretary at the end of 78, when I was 29. I thought at the time that something had to change at Parramatta, and I realised that at the time I was about the only person who could do it, who had a degree of support, because you needed the politics to have people vote for you one way or the other, and that's what was a big part of it, and it worked well. And then certainly from my point of view, not long after I took over that position, and it certainly wasn't me that brought the team together. That was, well, a number of factors. I played a small part in it, but you know, with Parramatta came to life probably initially the last 2 years I was playing, 76 the first grand final and the second one, where both those years were very, very close and we could have won those, but Jack Gibson was the man who brought it all together, and so really, to answer your question, one of them's short-term gratification to a degree, winning games when you're playing, and the other situation I did with 30 years here as the CEO of Leeds Club and the football club was something that was long-term and changing things from a very amateurish situation to being fully professional and always trying to learn more.
So, Dennis, ultimately, how important is it to have an organisation that does look after former players and staff like the Blue and Gold Alliance?
Oh, well, it's very important. I think it's it's you lose a lot if it's just you've been an employee, you've been a player, you've been a coach, official, or in days gone by we had a lot of helpers, honorary, that just enjoyed doing it, didn't get paid anything, maybe got a tracksuit or a beer or two at the end of the season. That really brings forward the camaraderie. Remember, we used to have, once again, 70s and 80s regular weekly barbecues where all the committee, directors, coaches and officials got together and we were all as one, as opposed to now where thankfully it's all very professional, but there's not much mix between the players and the supporters and the honorary people who just want to do it because they love Parramatta.
Yeah, I think certainly times have changed, haven't they? Without question. Dennis, thank you so much for your time. I'll let you get back and enjoy mixing with your mates and former teammates. And thank you for your time.
Okay, been a pleasure.